Hey everybody, it's Peter, and in this video I'm going to review the Yamaha Moro 5 and Moro 7 e-bikes. Now, I've reviewed e-bikes before on this channel, but nothing at all like this. First of all, it's quite light, it's really balanced, and it's really unique. And if you think about e-bikes, they're really growing right now, but where they're growing is in that sort of utilitarian kind of think outside the lines of a bike kind of lineup. So you can have things like cargo bikes, you can have things like comfort bikes, all of those things where performance doesn't really matter. The engine or the motor on it, sorry, can allow you to have a certain speed, but it's really just speed. And if you think about it, anybody can build an e-bike, and anybody can build a car if you want to go that simple. A car is simply a motor on a ladder with a couple axles and a gas tank on the back, and you've got yourself a car. But that car is not a Porsche. And that's really what it comes down to when you talk about this. This is not an inexpensive e-bike. This is not something that's low end. This is high end right the whole way through. But what it does is it gives a rider like myself, who in my 20s and teens really enjoyed mountain bike riding, it gives me complete access to that performance and more. And again, it is so well balanced, so light for what it is. It's really something that is super special. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a look at this e-bike and the 07, this is the 05 and the 07, and we're gonna go through them in detail and talk about what makes them more unique, what makes them worth the money, and help you decide if it's worth it for you. So again, coming from Yamaha, it's kind of interesting because it is in that dirt bike pricing, but this is a completely different animal, and it's super impressive as an e-bike. It really is something that's a class leader that I think most people are overlooking because it's not something you always see in the bike shop. So let's get going with this review. All right, there's an elephant in the room here. First thing we should talk about is I've got a tire here. We're filming here at McLean Sports. They're absolutely awesome. They give me complete access to their entire vehicle lineup, even if it includes e-bikes. But because this is a true mountain bike, it doesn't have a kickstand, so I improvised. I grabbed the closest thing to me, which is an ATV tire, also for sale here at McLean's. Link to McLean's is in the bio if you're interested in this bicycle. They know a lot more about it than I do, but it just was so interesting to me as they were talking to me about it, so I really wanted to cover it for you here. All right, so what we're gonna do is just kind of take a quick look at what you've got here, the basics, before we start zooming into the real specific details. So one of the key differences with a mountain bike compared to a traditional e-bike, a lot of e-bikes have a motor in the back, or they have a hub drive motor, or sorry, a motor right here. So when you have the hub drive motor in the back, that transfers a lot of weight to the back. What you have here is a lot of centralized weight. So you have the battery pack in the frame, and we'll show you this up close. It's got a frame on either side, but it's actually kind of open to that battery pack in here. That's part of what gives it lightweight. You've got the rear suspension mounted up high, again, sort of a split frame here. Well, again, we'll show you all that when you get closer. And then what's interesting about this drive unit here is a lot of the drive units for sale on other bikes are a Bosch drive system. This is Yamaha's own system, and it's their lightest version yet. And you can really feel when you lift this bike that it is very light. Now, it says on the spec sheet close to about 50 pounds. To me, it feels significantly lighter than that. And that really comes down to the balance of this bike. So that's when you have to think about why it's so hard to build a bike like this as an e-bike compared to just a regular around town commuter type thing where the weight distribution doesn't matter. So getting the weight distribution right, getting that balance front to back right, that sort of 50-50 weight distribution, is a really important piece to riding on a true off-road course or a true mountain bike type trail. You have to have that instinct of how to maneuver your body and how to maneuver the bike, and the only way you get that is if there's a balance front to rear, and Yamaha nails that with this thing. So it's really balanced. It's quite light, but again, it feels significantly lighter than the specs say, especially when you compare it to other e-bikes that just kind of feel unwieldy. This thing feels surprisingly light and very balanced. So that all comes down to what you're doing with balancing weight here, and it was obviously a key piece of their design. All right, so when we talk about an e-bike, we have to talk about the drive unit. We're gonna zoom right into this. So again, you can see it's pretty compact. I'll put my hands by it here. But I mean, this would be smaller diameter than a baseball. So you've really got a compact design. Some of them have much bigger circles there. So seeing them online, it's hard to show you exactly, but again, my hands aren't huge, but this is, again, smaller than a baseball, bigger than a golf ball kind of thing. That would probably be right here, golf ball size-ish. So you can just see a good compact size. It's mounted with just 2 bolts, so easy to service if you had to do anything with that way. But there's a lot going on here. So the benefit of having a drive system over in this section versus on the hub is it gives you some torque sensing ability, and it uses your chain. So you're really working with the system it sort of amplifies your torque. Now, in Canada, they have to be limited to 500 watts. Watts is kind of like horsepower. You know, about 750 watts is about a 1 horsepower. So watts is horsepower, but torque is different. So this is listed on the website here as 85 Newton meters of torque. Now again, that you compare that to your car numbers. If you start looking up Newton meters of torque, you start going, this is really impressive. But torque and horsepower don't work the same way. But you know, if you think about an electric car with a great acceleration, the torque is kind of that pulling power. And this is the what it does is it makes you feel more powerful than you are. Now, what's cool about this drive unit is, like most e-bikes, it's got multiple drive modes. So support modes is what they call them here on Yamaha with their spec sheet here. So they have an Eco, which is pretty common. That's just gonna give you a little bit of assist. The Eco generally just takes away the weight of the bike so it feels like a regular bike. And then it has standard, high, mountain bike, extra power, automatic, and walk assist. But there's an automatic system here, and that's what I really want to talk about in this. Now, before we go away from this view, you can see the cable routing is fantastic in this. What that does is it keeps everything protected. That's really, really important on a mountain bike. So when you're looking at it right over here, all of the cable routing, very, very well managed in this bike. We'll look at other places on the bike where it's very well managed. But again, you're dealing with something that feels like a regular mountain bike, but it gives you that assist. So let's back out and talk about that for a second. So when you're riding an e-bike, it's really important to the manufacturers that put the effort into it that this feels like a regular bike. And the starting point for that is having the motor here. When the motor's in your hub, it basically means that as you spin your pedals, it's gonna apply a certain level of power. So let's say it's got 3 power levels. If you're spinning and it's power level 3, you could put no effort in there and you're pretty much going to be going that 32 kilometer an hour maximum speed, or about 20 miles an hour. Now I say kilometers an hour because I'm filming in Canada, but also because this bike is legal in Canada as an e-bike, which means you can drive it on the roads, which means you can drive it on the trails, which means you can drive it anywhere. 32 kilometers an hour, 500 watt motor is the requirement in Canada to make it road legal. So what you're dealing with is something that is exactly a bicycle from a legal perspective, but again, it now feels like exactly a bicycle. So why have this automatic mode in here? The automatic mode, when you talk to owners of this bike, is really the magic that makes this different than, for instance, some of the Bosch systems. I have a Bosch system e-bike that I use. I've got not great knees. There's a lot of hills in Fredericton, and that works fine for me. But when you head to the trails, it's a little different. When you're not heading on the paved trails through Fredericton, which there's a lot of them there, and you're going off into the, say, Odell Park. If you've never seen Odell Park, you got to Google it. It's absolutely amazing. Got some ATVs coming through here. We're just going to keep going with it. But when you're taking a mountain bike off-road, you have a lot of undulations that happen very quickly. So when I'm driving on the paved trails in town, the hills are pretty predictable, and then they come to an end. It's pretty much downhill is predictable. And the difference with a mountain bike is being able to have the power to go up those little hills, coast across them, go back downhill, go up those steep hills. Having the automatic mode, what it does is it varies the power based on torque sensing and everything else. There's a sort of 4 sensors in there that can allow you to, when you're going up those steep hills, have the power you need, but also not give you too much power as you crest the hill and start coming back down and just touch the pedals. It's not going to jet you down the hill. You want a really predictable system, and the automatic mode on this does that. And the only way you can do that is through a hub motor, and Yamaha's perfected it for their use. So let's come in and take a little closer look. Brakes, controls, a number of things are unique on this bike. Let's take a look. All right, so let's start by taking a look at the front brake here. We're going to zoom right in here, and you can see that is a 4-piston caliper. If you think about it, it's very dirt bike style. So again, these are e-bike specific brakes, e-bike specific suspension. But again, this is all about giving you the feel of a regular mountain bike. And what you have, again, really strong brakes on a big disc. There's even bigger discs. This one has on the back here a 2-piston caliper. The Moro 7, which we'll show you in a second, has a 4-piston caliper on the back. So you can increase that stopping power even more. These are tied to a single finger lever. So again, very light and easy to pull, which is what the strong braking does. A lot of times you can have, brakes that work just fine. You can lock up the tires, but it's a very firm pull. So when you have to pull really firm, you can't be as precise, and when you can't be as precise, you can't be having as much fun, you can't be as quick, you can't have that real control that you want. So this is all about giving you control, from the weight balance to the brake to the suspension. 160 millimeters of suspension here, or travel here on the suspension. You've got air adjustable suspension, you've also got compression, rebound damping, and a lot of slow speed compression. So again, unlike a motorcycle, you're doing more slow speed compression or slow speed movement on a bicycle, especially a mountain bike. So it has the full adjustment there to both handle the e-bike's power, allow you to jump stop and land, but also allow you to have that sort of slow speed compression that you don't get in something like a motorcycle that it takes care of here for you on the front fork here. Let's work our way up to the handlebar before we go to rear suspension, rear brakes, and at some point we'll swap out the 07 instead of the 05 model that we're looking at right now, which is just a little step up. So taking a look at the left side controls, again, those levers here are just small little levers, whatever you want to call them. But again, because you have so much stopping power, you can really control them with just the 2 fingers, which allows you to keep your other fingers wrapped around for control of the handlebar itself or the bike itself, and constant control, keeping your fingers on there while keeping your other fingers on the grip here. So you've got full control, again, just like a regular regular mountain bike without electric assist. And then what you've got in here is, we'll ignore this little lever right here. That controls your seat post. We'll show you that in a second. But just a simple button switch up and down to control some of your assists. So if we come over to here, what we'll do is we'll show you this one here. Again, it's about being purist here. Most e-bikes have a display. Most of the times that display shows you the speedometer or something like that. This one doesn't. So we're going to turn it on here. You can see battery level and your assist level. So we can kind of play with that assist right there. Again, the colors aren't showing perfectly. It went blue to green and then full green there, and you have a sort of a in-between yellow here. Hard to get those colors. Maybe I can sort of adapt it. Nope. Sometimes when I put my hand there, it adapts. We'll show the display in a future video to show you how everything works, but you have that ability to have multiple power settings. You can see what your battery's at, and you also have the ability to go into that auto setting, which really gives you that customizable thing. So again, what I like about this is it's a clean dash here. You barely notice this. You're not glancing down to see your speed. You're paying attention to the trail and you're having fun. And again, the e-bike aspect of this disappears. All right, so we swapped from the Moro 05 to the Moro 07, and we're gonna try to show you the frame here. So again, blue bike is the higher end bike, and you're gonna see a few higher end details on here. So first of all, a lot of this is the same. The frame detail is the same. You can see that gap in there. I'm filming from a bit of a weird angle. You can see that suspension down in there. And again, the battery, same thing. The frame wraps around here, wraps around there. And again, the frame is just the same way as this is kind of like, just a single bar there. This is just a single bar here. So it's a bar on each side. This replicates this, only in a larger frame size. So we're gonna drop the camera down here if I can do some smooth camera work, which I can't do that smooth, and you're gonna be able to see some of that rear suspension. So when you move up to this model here, there's a couple key differences. We mentioned that rear brake with the extra 4-piston caliper on the rear brake, but what you also have is the 05 has this suspension in here, but this one adds the piggyback shock. So again, just like on a high-end off-road vehicle, power sport vehicle, a high-end Jeep, high-end pickup truck, anything that's gonna have a lot of suspension compression where you're just like constantly moving in and out is gonna create some heat. And all of that heat goes into the piggyback shock, which means you're gonna have that really consistent performance over time. So again, not that the other suspension is weak or can't handle it. It can probably handle everything I can throw at it and more. But if you wanna step up to a true top of the line performance, you go with a piggyback shock in the rear, and that gives you that really consistent performance. So the rear suspension, it's not just to go off jumps. It's not at all really for comfort on a bike like this. This is about keeping your rear wheel in contact with the ground, which when you're pedaling really makes a difference, especially with an e-bike, because you can apply more power than you normally would with just your legs, which means when you can apply more power, it only matters if you can keep that suspension in the ground, connected, or that wheel connected to the ground. And that's what a really high-end, really precise suspension will do. The precision matters when you're really going off-road and you want to have some fun, really kind of hook it up, and that's what this does. So taking a look at the chain side here, again, we're swapping the bike out. This is the same, the 07 model compared to the 05. We look at the 05, the motor on that side. The motor is actually the same on both bikes, but what we're doing is swapping out to the chain side here. Now again, single chain ring here, pretty common for a modern mountain bike, but remember, you really don't need more gears because you have an extra electric assist. So very compact design here. One of the key pieces is this little chainstay. You've got a really, really strong chainstay there. That matters because sometimes the way you're pedaling and what actually goes to the chain is going to be a little bit different than on a traditional bike. So you can have less torque all of a sudden as you're shifting gears or that kind of thing. And if you shift gears and hit a bump, that kind of thing. I have a regular e-bike with a similar drive system where on occasion, if you hit the bump at the right time while you're shifting or something like that, you can lose that chain off here. This isn't gonna happen on this bike. It's made to do exactly what it's gonna do, rough terrain, and keep it in gear. And again, that's just because your pedals aren't always putting the same torque on, or they're putting more torque or less torque than you do with your with your legs. Now, one of the key things is because of that, you need a good solid place for the chain to crash into if you're going on various things. So this is a rubberized chain guide. A lot of times you'll hear a lot of clicking and clacking from the chain that hits the tube here when you don't have a true rubberized thing, especially on an e-bike, because again, that torque can kind of vary. You can see that cable routing again in this side here, excellent for the brakes. But again, this gives you that less clacking, less noise when you're going over rough terrain, and works really, really well. So Dior components on here, front and rear. I believe this is a 12 speed here. You know, let's just look up the teeth number. We'll come back at a different angle and we'll talk about the teeth. So looking at this angle here, I've got the specs in front of me. It's 10 teeth over here, 51 teeth over here. Now again, compared to a regular bicycle, you're gonna want a bigger range in gearing because it's easier to go fast. So a very, very, very small gear over here is important. Again, the front chainring is not that small, is not that large, so the difference between this and that isn't as big as on some bikes because it is a mountain bike designed to climb any hill. But the real range here is what gives you the ability to, again, feel like a regular bike. It feels like you're just riding a regular bike, but you've got so much more power. You just feel stronger. But the range of gearing matters because you can run out of gearing for speed, and it's still possible to run out of gearing for climbing hills. You want to give that electric motor and yourself the best efficiency to not just get up the hill using all the power, but to do it efficiently and do it well. So range and gearing matters. Good shifting to your components also matters. Let's just take a look at that 4-piston caliper on the other side, and then we'll move our way back up through a couple other features of this bike. So taking a look at the 07 still here, again, the top of the line version here, you can see those rear brakes there, that 4-piston caliper front and rear, and it's hard to show you the size again, but a huge disc here. So again, this is all about control and power. Again, larger brakes means you have a little bit more precision at the lever, which means it just feels like it's doing exactly what you want it to do. Let's look at one more mountain bike component that I kind of love, that they're doing on bikes that I didn't have when I was a kid, but they're pretty cool now. All right, every true mountain bike nowadays has a dropper seat post, and this is just one of the coolest things because I used to wish for this as a kid and I never even thought about it. But this is a pretty common thing now. So when you're off-road and you're on your legs, on your feet, and not sitting on the saddle, what you want to do is you want the seat to be out of its way. So essentially the seat can drop down to too low of a position for you, basically to get it out of the way. But when you hit level ground, you want to instantly raise it. So the left side lever over here, that one that looks like the gear shift lever, you pop that and it pops right back up. And of course you can put it anywhere you want in between. And you can see you don't need my full body weight to push it down. So even if you're climbing a hill and you don't want to transfer too much weight to the rear to push it back, you can just put a little bit of weight on that as you're riding. And again, the amount of pressure you have to put on this really matters because this bike is built for weight transfer. It's so well balanced. So going up the hill, you want to sit down again, you can sit down on it, but you can just press a little bit of weight. So again, the fact that I can push it with just my hand here easily instead of my whole body weight allows you to press it down to the level you want with your rear end without having to send a ton of weight transfer back. So again, smart components that make this feel like a regular mountain bike. So now let's compare the 07 and the 05, the two models from Yamaha, and we'll wrap up with who these bikes are for and who they're not for. All right, so let's talk about what's the same on these bikes. Basically, everything. So if I don't mention it, it's pretty much, you can assume it's the same. There are a few little things I'm not going to mention, but the key components are the same. The battery's the same. The motor's the same. We should talk about charging that battery. It's a key spec that you want to pay attention to. So charging this battery 0 to 80% takes 1 hour on a regular plug. Now that last 20% is going to add significant time. So 0 to 100% is going to take 4 hours. Now if you think about electric car, Tesla for instance, they don't let you charge or they don't recommend you charge the Tesla to 100% all the time. Because of course if a lithium-ion battery sits at full charge, it's not the best for it. So most Teslas, most electric vehicle standards recommend that you charge to about 80% and store it there. And if you need the 100%, then you put that in just before you go for a drive. So it would be the same idea here. If you're going to go out for a ride one day, you can plug it in to fill it up. But 80% is probably going to be all the battery you need for most rides. And again, that takes 1 hour to replenish. So you can go out, 80% of your battery, come back, plug it in another hour, 80% of your battery. But again, that extra few hours to get to that full charge. And I always say, think of it like pouring a glass of milk or something like that, right? You got to kind of start real slow and you can fill it really quickly to about 80%, and then you got to slow it down. Elon Musk talks about it's like all the electrons or all the pieces or particles are coming in to fill a parking lot. When you have an empty parking lot, you can fill it quickly. It's the last 20% that takes some time for everything to find its spot. That's why that last 80% or that last 20% is often slower on a battery like this. So 1 hour charge time, simple, simple. Now what's the same? Motor, battery, we talked about the suspension difference in the rear, front and rear suspensions difference. This one to me seems to have just a hair more ground clearance based on the tire that I'm using to support them. I didn't check that spec. The weight is very similar. The rear brakes are different on here, but the front brakes feel very similar, if not exactly the same. And then basically you're looking at Shimano XT components versus Dior components on the two models. For some people, I don't know if that'll make a huge difference. For other people, you know what you want, you get what you want, and that's the real difference here. So again, these aren't super cheap e-bikes, but never, ever, ever buy a super cheap e-bike. You end up with a problem down the road. I've seen it way too many times. What this is something that is a high-end mountain bike, which is already gonna cost you several $1,000s with high-end e-bike components, which put you in a market where yes, it's in the same price range as Yamaha's own small dirt bikes, but the difference with this is you can use this anywhere. If I drive this around Fredericton here where McLean's is located, you can go on the road, up the hills, you can go into Odell Park, up the hills, you can find any trail you want, and you can go on the bike trails here. There's a lot of paved bike trails here. All of it's legal, all of it is regular bicycle stuff, and the best thing about this is it feels like a regular bicycle, including the fact that it is super well balanced and super easy to lift up. You know, I'm just talking here, and it's just, you can't do that with any other e-bike. These things are super, super impressive. And if you want to check out a really impressive e-bike that feels like a mountain bike but gives you the strength you had maybe when you were younger or well beyond that strength, this bike is worth considering. So there's my extended review of this Yamaha Moro 7, Moro 5. Check them out here at McLean's. There's a link in the bio there. Definitely worth a look. If there's questions that you have about it that I didn't get to, do me a favor, let me know in the comments and I'll make sure I come back to you. I know we got to go over the controls. We can do that later. I can ride this in the spring and sort of take it outside and show you what it's like. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you in the next one.